My name is Emma Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Enterprises, one of the top tech empires in the country. I built this company from scratch, turning it into a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse. I trusted my husband, Richard, and his personal assistant, Amanda. I gave them key roles in the company. I believed they were family. I was wrong. One morning, I received a call from my attorney. Something wasn't right with the company's finances, he said. I looked into it and found that $600 million had vanished. Gone. I couldn't believe it. Richard and Amanda had quietly funneled the money into offshore accounts. But they didn't just steal. They were planning a takeover, to push me out and seize everything I had built. I felt betrayal, rage, pain. But I didn't let emotion rule me. I knew I had to act, fast and smart. I began gathering evidence, worked with forensic accountants, legal experts, and people who owed me favors in very high places. I said nothing to Richard or Amanda. I smiled at them in meetings, let them feel safe, even as I closed the trap inch by inch. This was just the beginning. I wasn't about to let them burn down what I'd spent a lifetime building. I was going to take back everything that was mine and make sure they regretted ever crossing me. I knew better than to strike impulsively. People like Richard and Amanda, cunning, arrogant traitors, always leave traces. And me? I'm an expert at turning those traces into weapons. I hired a team of forensic financial specialists. Within 2 weeks, they mapped out Richard's secret money trails. He wasn't as smart as he thought. His moves were sloppy, arrogant. Amanda wasn't any better. She used her company credit card to buy luxury items right after the funds were transferred. Designer bags, expensive watches, even a penthouse, all under her sister's name. Clever? Not quite. Once I had every piece of the puzzle, I stayed silent. Richard still sat across from me in meetings, pretending to be concerned about financial irregularities. Amanda smiled sweetly, acting innocent. I let them. Letting them feel safe was my most powerful weapon. I started whispering in the right places. Subtle questions in the break room, a hint of doubt in the boardroom. Not direct, just enough to plant seeds of paranoia. Then came Alex Monroe, my lawyer, ruthless, calculated, deadly in a courtroom. I gave him everything. He filed official reports to the board, detailing suspicious activities tied directly to Richard and Amanda. The news spread like wildfire. Investors panicked. Executives turned cold. Richard lost control. I saw it in his eyes. Amanda? She avoided looking at me entirely. While they panicked, I stayed calm. This was my game now. I controlled every move. When the time was right, I delivered the knockout blow. I revealed everything, evidence, recordings, transactions, in a private board meeting. There was no escape. Richard sat frozen. Amanda broke down in tears. No one came to their rescue. And me? I stood, straightened my blazer, and said just one thing before leaving the room. The game has only just begun. Richard used to be the man I trusted most. He was there in the early days when Carter Enterprises was nothing but a dream. He stood beside me, promised loyalty, and vowed to build something great together. But when the masks came off, what remained wasn't a partner. It was a snake. After that fateful meeting, there was no more hiding. Richard was immediately suspended. The news hit the press, sending shockwaves through the business world. Stock prices dipped slightly, but I was prepared. I faced the media head-on and declared, Carter Enterprises does not need Richard Carter to survive. That line became headline news. And just like that, Richard became toxic. Investors abandoned him. Longtime allies ghosted him. Even his personal attorney began keeping his distance. Amanda? She vanished from social media overnight. From a power couple, they became pariahs. But losing money and reputation wasn't enough. I wanted Richard to feel it, to truly understand what betrayal tastes like. That's why I hired a top investigative journalist, someone who didn't pull punches. I leaked everything. Emails where Richard mocked me, recordings of him plotting to push me out, even cruel jokes he made at private parties about replacing me. Piece by piece, the media devoured him. Emma Carter's ex-husband humiliated. After backstabbing attempt. From boardroom king to public disgrace. Betrayed CEO strikes back. Headlines flooded the news cycle. And Richard? He collapsed. Word spread that he barely left his house. Once the center of every glamorous event, now he was invisible. Nobody called. Nobody cared. Amanda, rumor had it, even she stopped answering. His desperate calls. I didn't even need to lift a finger anymore. The world did the dirty work for me. Richard Carter, the man who once looked me in the eyes and called me useless, had become a ghost. But I wasn't finished yet. Not even close. This was just the appetizer. And Richard was about to learn that crossing me was the biggest mistake of his life. One thing I knew from the very start, traitors might hide from public shame, but they can't hide from the law. Richard and Amanda thought they could quietly settle everything behind the scenes. They thought wrong. When I make a move, I leave no exits. That's when my attorney, Monroe, stepped in. He wasn't the charming, smiling type. No. Alex was cold steel wrapped in a tailored suit, and when it came to legal warfare, he was a nightmare no opponent ever wanted to face. Leave this to me, Alex said calmly, his eyes sharp and deadly. And so I did. Within a week, Alex filed civil and criminal lawsuits, simultaneously. The charges? Breach of fiduciary duty, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit corporate theft. Words that may sound dry on paper. But to Richard and Amanda, they were death sentences. Alex wasn't done. He tipped off the tax authorities. $600 million doesn't just vanish without attracting government interest. Within days, government agencies froze their assets. Cars, yachts, penthouses, gone. Even Richard's beloved sports car and Amanda's newly purchased penthouse were seized. Now they weren't just broke, they were trapped. The media went wild. Emma Carter fights back. Husband and mistress face massive lawsuit. From power couple to powerless criminals. Reporters couldn't get enough. Richard scrambled. He hired new lawyers, issued weak statements, but it didn't matter. Alex was merciless. He left no room for negotiation. There will be no deals, Alex told me without blinking. They tried to steal your empire. Now we're going to take everything they have left, and more. Every dollar they stole, every lie they told, every plan they whispered in dark corners, it all became ammunition against them. The trial date was set. The media called it Judgment Day for Richard and Amanda. And me? I simply sat back, swirling wine in my glass, watching the chaos unfold. Because I already knew. With Alex by my side, their downfall wasn't a possibility. It was inevitable. They played the wrong game. With the wrong woman. The trial day finally arrived. The media called it the trial of the century. The courtroom was packed. Outside, reporters swarmed like vultures, desperate to capture every second of Richard and Amanda's humiliation. When they appeared, the crowd gasped. Richard, once the confident man who commanded boardrooms, looked like a ghost. Amanda, the once proud secretary draped in luxury, kept her head down, too ashamed to face the cameras. They walked into the courtroom, but they weren't walking in as power players anymore. They were walking straight into their execution. I sat front row, calm, collected, watching them with cold detachment. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know exactly who had brought them to this moment. The prosecution didn't hold back. Every dirty detail was exposed. Fake invoices, hidden accounts, private messages. Richard Carter and Amanda Green, the prosecutor declared, you stole $600 million from Emma Carter, your wife and CEO, and conspired to overthrow her empire. The courtroom buzzed with outrage, but the real knockout came when Monroe stood up. He played a video. Richard drunk at a private party bragging about his plan to replace me, laughing, mocking me, Amanda giggling beside him. The room fell silent. Richard went pale. Amanda broke down in tears. There was no escape. When the video ended, Alex only said one thing, cold and sharp as ice. This is how they honored the woman who built their kingdom. The jury didn't need long. Guilty. Every count. Richard looked destroyed. Amanda sobbed uncontrollably. I stood, straightened my jacket, and turned to leave. Reporters swarmed me, shoving microphones in my face. "Emma, how does victory feel?" one asked. I stopped, turned slightly, and smiled. Never play dirty with the woman who taught you how to win. That was it. No screaming, no petty insults, just truth. I, Emma Carter, taught them the final brutal lesson right there, in front of the entire world. The trial was over. Justice had been served. But for Richard and Amanda, the real punishment was just beginning. They didn't go to prison right away. The appeals process bought them time. Time that became their slow-motion descent into hell. Their bank accounts were frozen. Their assets, cars, yachts, condos, all seized. But the worst part wasn't losing wealth. It was losing status. The same colleagues who once kissed their feet now avoided them like a plague. Friends? Gone. Lawyers? Quitting. Amanda's luxurious life? Reduced to pawn shops and foreclosure notices. She sold her designer jewelry, her handbags, even her Instagram-flaunted penthouse, just to cover legal bills. Richard? Word had it he was crashing in a shabby apartment, paranoid and forgotten. But that wasn't the end. The public wasn't done with them. The media ripped them apart. CEO betrayed by husband. Corporate heist ends in ruin. Richard Carter, from Titan to trash. It was relentless. They couldn't leave the house without being recognized. Couldn't scroll through their phones without being dragged. They became a national punchline. But the final humiliation? Richard's public apology, written by my legal team, word for word. In it, he confessed to everything. His betrayal, his greed, his failure. He begged for forgiveness. Amanda didn't even get that far. Her new boyfriend dumped her the moment the verdict went public. She disappeared from every event, every screen, every circle she once flaunted herself in. I didn't have to touch them. I didn't have to say a word. I just watched, as everything they once were, everything they once had, was stripped away. And the best part? They'll remember me. Every single day. I, Emma Carter, didn't just destroy them. I left them to live in the ruins of their own choices. Because true revenge doesn't end in court. It ends when the silence becomes unbearable, and they realize the world moved on without them. Richard and Amanda were nothing now. Forgotten names clinging to broken reputations. And me? I stood on the other side of that destruction, higher than ever before. When the board officially announced Emma Carter will continue as chairwoman and CEO indefinitely, the company erupted, not out of fear, out of respect. They knew I was the only one capable of steering Carter Enterprises through chaos. Stock prices soared. The media flipped their narrative overnight. I became a legend. The iron CEO who rose from betrayal. Emma Carter, the phoenix of corporate America. Invitations flooded in, conferences, global panels, partnerships. People who once ignored my calls now fought for seconds of my attention. Funny how fast loyalty shifts when you win. I didn't stop there. I rebuilt the company in my image. No more freeloaders, no more yes men, no more politics. I promoted the loyal, empowered the overlooked, and eliminated dead weight. In my empire, there were only two choices: contribute or leave. This wasn't revenge. This was evolution, ruthless and necessary. And I wasn't just feared, I was respected, globally. My next move sealed my dominance. I acquired our biggest competitor, the very company that once rejected me when Richard still pulled strings. Overnight, they became just another division under my command. The headlines screamed, "Emma Carter redefines corporate power." I wasn't just the CEO anymore. I was a living legend. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about validation. This was about making sure no one ever dared to underestimate me again. I had become what they feared most, a queen they couldn't dethrone. And as I stared down from my tower of victory, I whispered to myself, "This is my empire now. And I make the rules." Most people, after claiming the throne, would relax. They'd celebrate, Get comfortable. Not me. Not Emma Carter. I knew better. The higher you climb, the more knives aim for your back. That's why I didn't slow down. I tightened my grip. I rewrote every rule. The first thing I did? Purged the leadership. Anyone who once backed Richard or stood silently while I was betrayed? Gone. They thought I'd forget? They didn't know me at all. I don't do petty revenge, but I never, ever forgive betrayal. Their replacements? Handpicked by me. True warriors, not ass-kissers. People who dared to challenge me when needed. Because real queens don't surround themselves with cowards. They surround themselves with sharpened steel. Then I rewrote company policy. No more freeloaders, no more favors, no more nepotism. Carter Enterprises became a meritocracy overnight. Perform or disappear. Simple as that. The business world gasped. They thought I'd go soft after my battles. Instead, I became sharper, colder, unstoppable. And just when they thought they figured me out, I made my boldest move yet, swallowing the very competitor who once mocked me. Overnight, they weren't competition anymore. They were mine. The media lost its mind. Emma Carter sets new global standard. I didn't care about headlines, I cared about dominance. About making sure every single player in the industry knew. They answered to me now. They played by my rules, or they didn't play at all. Sitting at the head of the empire I rebuilt, I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. I didn't just crush my enemies. I created a new kingdom, one that no one could ever challenge again. Because in my world now, it's simple. Play my game, or be removed from the board. Richard and Amanda were done. My company was stronger than ever. I had rebuilt it into a fortress, and I stood alone at the top. But there was still one thing left. The outsiders. The ones who hadn't directly betrayed me, but had quietly enjoyed the spectacle. The investors who once turned their backs. The execs who never invited me to the real meetings. The so-called friends who whispered behind my back and laughed at the pretty CEO with no real power. They thought they were safe, thought they'd just watch me fight, then pretend like nothing happened. That's not how I work. I don't forget. I don't forgive. And I never let anyone walk away clean. So I turned my attention to them. Quietly, methodically. I didn't destroy them. No, I did something far worse. I shut them out. Every deal they wanted, I took first. Every market they entered, I dominated before they could breathe. Every conference they applied to, I hosted instead. Their phone calls, ignored. Their emails, unanswered. I didn't speak their names. I didn't have to. The industry did it for me. They were being erased, and everyone knew it. One by one, they started crawling back. Smiles forced, voices polite, begging to be let in, begging to be part of the empire they once laughed at. I took their meetings. I let them speak. And then, when they finished groveling, I looked them dead in the eyes and said, "Oh, you're still around? I assumed you'd forgotten who I was." They stammered, tried to recover, but I'd already turned away. That was the punishment. Not public shame, not lawsuits, just complete undeniable irrelevance. I didn't need to crush them. I let the silence do it for me. Because now, Emma Carter wasn't just a CEO. I was the gatekeeper. The name they once ignored. Now the only one that mattered. And in my world, you don't get to forget me. I make damn sure of that. When all the outsiders had finally bowed, when every rival became nothing more than dust in my path, I knew I had officially entered a new realm. I was no longer Emma Carter, the betrayed CEO or the underestimated woman fighting to survive. I was Emma Carter, the first name every major player uttered before making a single move. Every project? Mine first? Every deal? Cleared through me? Every global summit? I didn't attend them. I led them. From Silicon Valley to Europe to Asia, I dominated. My empire wasn't just respected, it was untouchable. No one dared cross. Me. Not because they loved me, but because they knew I controlled everything. They played by my rules now, or they didn't play at all. The corporate world didn't dare test me. The media couldn't stop praising me. Emma Carter, the woman who took it all. The unrivaled queen of business. But this wasn't about headlines. This wasn't about validation. This was about control. Absolute. Unchallenged. Final. Sitting at the top, watching the industry move only when I allowed it, was strangely quiet. But necessary. I knew better than anyone. Power unguarded is power waiting to be taken. So I kept my grip tight. Ruthless efficiency became law. No more favors, no more handouts. In my empire, you produce or you disappear. Simple. And when the world finally adjusted to that reality, I made my boldest move yet. I swallowed the last competitor standing. The very company that once humiliated me now existed only as a small division under my reign. They didn't celebrate. They didn't even resist. They knew resistance was pointless. I had won. Not just the battle, not just the war. I owned the entire world they once believed belonged to them. Late at night, I'd sip my wine, look out, over the city, and remind myself, I didn't win because I was lucky. I won because I never forgot, never forgave, and never let go of my vision. This world, it had rejected me once. Now it couldn't breathe without me. I, Emma Carter, didn't just rule this empire, I became the empire, and the message was clear. The world belongs to me now, forever. I had won. Completely. Without question. The world that once mocked me now bent at my feet. Every enemy crushed, every voice of doubt silenced, every rival erased. I stood at the peak, alone, undefeated. In the eyes of the world, I wasn't Emma Carter, the betrayed wife or the underestimated CEO anymore. I was Emma Carter, the untouchable queen. When I walked into global summits, entire rooms stood. When I spoke, billionaires stayed silent. When I gave orders, governments shifted. They didn't respect me. They feared me. But here's the thing no one tells you about reaching the top. It's quiet. Too quiet. I didn't have enemies anymore. I didn't have challengers. No scandals, no betrayals. Just endless yes men nodding to whatever I said. They weren't allies, they were survivors. And me? I wasn't playing anymore. I was simply ruling. At first, I welcomed it. Control. Absolute, flawless control. No one could touch me. No one dared try. But as weeks turned into months, something unsettling crept in. I stopped feeling the thrill. Every deal closed without a fight. Every decision met no resistance. Every room I walked into fell silent before I even spoke. Victory had become routine, and routine felt hollow. Late at night, in my penthouse overlooking the sleeping city, I faced the truth. I had everything. Money, power, legacy. But the fire was gone. There was no more game. No more proving them wrong. I had already crushed them all. I sipped my wine, eyes on the skyline, and asked myself the one question I couldn't escape. If the board is empty, am I even playing anymore? The answer hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I knew what it meant. This was the price. Absolute power wasn't thrilling. It was cold, isolated, silent. But I didn't flinch. I chose this. Better to rule alone than to ever be laughed at again. I, Emma Carter, became untouchable, unmatched, alone. And though the silence was deafening, I wore my crown anyway, because I wasn't finished yet, not until I decided how this story would end. Months passed. My empire continued to thrive. I didn't just rule my industry, I owned it. Competitors were extinct. Partners bowed before speaking. Deals were decided before negotiations even began. I was everywhere. Headlines, awards, power lists. But at the summit, something else surfaced. Boredom. A cold, creeping emptiness. I wasn't chasing anymore. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I had already won. Too perfectly. I sat alone in my office one night, staring at the glowing skyline. It hit me then. I had no one left to fight, no challengers, no doubters, no enemies plotting in the shadows. The war was over. And I had killed the game itself. That realization didn't terrify me, but it woke something deep inside. I could keep going. I could stay queen forever. But why? Wins had become automatic. Dominance was effortless. There was no more thrill, no more risk, only repetition. I thought about those still chasing, the new CEOs clawing their way up, the dreamers making mistakes I once made. They were alive. And me? I was frozen. Untouchable, yes, but untouched. That night, I made a choice, not out of weakness, but power. I called an emergency board meeting. Every executive sat nervously, expecting another ruthless decree. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'm stepping away." Silence. They couldn't process it. Queens don't abdicate, winners don't walk away. But I wasn't leaving out of defeat. I was leaving because I had won everything worth winning. I left Carter Enterprises in the hands of those I trusted. I packed no crown, no farewell. Tour, just freedom. I traveled. I laughed. I rediscovered simple pleasures the world thought I had forgotten. And everywhere I went, whispers followed. That's Emma Carter. The woman who owned it all and chose to walk away. They spoke of me like a legend. Because that's what I had become. I didn't need a throne to prove anything. I didn't need power to remind them who I was. I, Emma Carter, ended the game on my terms. I wasn't dethroned. I chose to step down. Because true power is leaving the board and still being the name everyone fears long after you're gone. The world kept spinning. Fresh faces rose. Young CEOs eager to prove themselves jumped into the ruthless game I once ruled. They clawed for deals, fought for relevance, chased headlines, just like I used to. But me, I watched, calm, distant, unbothered. I had no desire to rejoin. Because I, Emma Carter, understood something they didn't. Once you become a true queen, you no longer need the board. Your legacy is carved into every piece, every rule, every desperate player. What I built, what I conquered, no one could erase. Though I stepped down from the empire, my name still echoed everywhere. Every time power shifted, my legend whispered through the walls. Emma Carter, the woman who rewrote the rules, then walked away when no challenge remained. That's real power, not clinging to the throne, leaving it behind. So untouchable. No one dares sit there again. One serene morning, I shut my laptop for good, silenced my phone, and stepped outside. The world bustled, unaware. I breathed in freedom, smiled softly, and thought, the game ended long ago. I ended it. No rivals pushed me out. No enemies forced me down. I walked away. On my terms. That wasn't weakness. That was the ultimate victory. I, Emma Carter, rose from pawn to queen. And when I had nothing left to prove, I chose to leave. Because real queens know when the game is no longer worth playing. Somewhere out there, they still compete, still scheme, still fight for scraps of power I once ruled. But they all remember, even without a queen on the board. My shadow covers every move they make.